12:45, Andy will give me a signal that we're up heading up against the time. I'll ask people to submit their questions. And then when we find a good break after that, 12:48, 12:50, no later than 12:50, we'll go. Hopefully there'll be some good questions. Andy will read those out in the chat for you. Hopefully we'll get some good ones. And then 12, yep.
All right, ready to go?
Let's do. Yep.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our 8th session of the Conversations in Transportation series. Again, I'm Andy Wagner. Dr. Armour calls me the producer of these. I'll only be your host here for another 30 seconds or a minute. Just a couple of announcements. If you've been to one of these before, you know the deal. You will get your PDH and evaluation form sent to you via email this afternoon. If you have any trouble getting that later on today, please send me an email. You should have received an email from me earlier today. If you didn't and you still need my email address, it'll be on the exit slide at the end of the presentation. So please let me know if you have trouble with any of that. One new announcement is that if you want to go back and watch one of our previous sessions, again, we have recorded all of them, and we will record today's as well. We actually have a YouTube playlist that we've set up with all of the past sessions. You can find that on the NICSI website under the Conversations in Transportation webpage. Again, if you have any questions about that, please feel free to get in contact with me. Again, with that, the only other announcement, as always, is to get your questions in. You can ask a question anytime using that Q&A function that's at the bottom of the Zoom window. That's the best way for us to keep track of what questions we've answered and what questions we haven't. Again, the last 15 minutes or so of today's hour-long session will be dedicated to Q&A. So again, you can ask a question whenever one comes to mind. Even starting right now, but if there's something that comes up in the course of the conversation or you'd like to know more, just enter that question with the Q&A function. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Armour.
Thanks, Andy, and hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Very happy to be with you today to talk about highway safety. Tough topic, trending in the wrong direction, but we're going to talk about why it's going the wrong way and what we can do about it here with a superb guest. So thanks to the Strategic Initiative Council and the Young Members Council for sponsoring this session. Really appreciate that. Thanks to our company sponsors for financially making it possible for NICSI to do this program and others. Really do appreciate that. The purpose of the conversation series is to provide good educational programming through conversations with transportation industry leaders, interesting people talking about the topics we need to hear about. So hopefully that's why you found us today and you find this interesting. And again, I'll echo what Andy said. Please type your questions into the Q&A so we can field those later. So yep, talking about safety today, the very distressing trend of fatalities being up from 19 to 20, up again from 20 to 21, and looks like up again from 21 to 22. Just a horrible trend. What can we do about it? How can we get that reversed and headed back in the correct direction? And our guest today is Kim Eccles of VHB. Thanks, Kim, for joining us. Kim is the safety practice leader at VHB here in Raleigh. VHB is a large consulting firm with headquarters in Massachusetts, but a good sized presence in North Carolina. Kim is a leader in the safety field for many years now, involved in many types of safety related research and practical problems, national, state, local levels. Kim has a bachelor's in civil engineering from Michigan State. Go Green.
Go White.
I have a degree from as well. And she has a master's in civil engineering from NC State, where I had was fortunate enough to be her thesis advisor back in the days. And she was one of those people when they came through our program. My main job was to get out of her way and let her get her degree and get onward, which she's done spectacularly since then. So again, Kim, thanks for joining us. Do I have the numbers right? The fatality numbers nationally up about 10% per year for the last 3 years. I mean, is that what it looks like to you too?
Yeah, and thank you for having me. I didn't want to interrupt your intro, but I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And of course, you're so humble. You're fabulous thesis advisor, and part of the reason that I came to North Carolina State. So yeah, yes, and one thing, the 10% a year, and one way I look at it is, if we're on track for about 42,000 fatalities, for 2021, when the numbers all come in. And if you think that just in 2011, we were at about 32,000 fatalities. So in 10 years, how did we go from 32,000 fatalities to 42,000 fatalities? And, in 2011, we felt like, okay, we know some things, we're making some progress. So how do we lose that much ground in 10 years? And that, to me, that 10-year slide is even more meaningful. It's that, because it tells you that we can do better. 10 years wasn't that long ago. And so, just to have lose that much ground in 10 years is how I've been kind of thinking about it.
And in North Carolina, pretty much tracking with the national numbers, right?
Yeah. I think last year it was like 1,700 and maybe 55 or so people who didn't make it home to their holiday dinners. So, I mean, just think about how large, how large 1,700 people is in our state.
Yeah. North Carolina is a uniquely rural state, right?
Mm-hmm.
Last count that I had, more
Mm-hmm.
rural residents than any other state in the U.S. Is fatality on the highway a mostly rural problem?
So in North Carolina, yeah, it's more rural than urban. In the nation, it used to be more rural than urban, and then just a few years ago it switched. But it used to be, I think right now it's 45% rural and 55% urban. So a little more than half on either side, right? But like 19% of the U.S. population lives in rural areas. So so that says something, right? And so yes, ours is more rural. We're right at that, I think 54%. But I also think when we look at like how our state's changing, and some areas are rural, but I make a reference to the farms that like are south of where you and I are here in Raleigh. I know not everyone on the phone is in Raleigh right now, but those farms now, they grow houses. And so, there is a lot of, there's a lot of, in our state in particular, in Wake County, Mecklenburg County, there's a lot of changes in land use too, where rural areas are no longer necessarily farming areas. They're, they're farm to market roads that are growing houses. So
it's tough to draw the boundaries there too, but that's, I think one, as I look at it, maybe one liability that North Carolina brings with it is still more rural, and this, to the extent that this is still a more rural problem. And how does the U.S. compare to other developed countries in this regard? Is Europe also trending upward, or Canada or Australia?
Yeah, so the International Transport Forum, they looked at, I think they took 34 countries and looked at what happened in 2020. And kind of the shocking thing is that fatalities decreased elsewhere in those 34. They didn't put the US in there because the US was going to drag the number down so much. They pulled the US out. And so, in their report, kind of looking at that, they draw on a couple things to say, like, why is the US so different? And I think it's the same things that, that I would say are happening, but the US is more impaired driving, more speeding, and failure to wear a seatbelt. So two of those three things are things that we had been making progress on. And then in the last couple of years, and those being impaired driving and seatbelt use, we had been making some progress in the last 2 years. Those have really gone up. So that's kind of really interesting, right? Countries that, that we think are similar to us, and like, so what happened with us that didn't happen with other countries? And so I know it, a lot of people look to, different countries. You mentioned Canada, people look to Australia, Sweden. I have two countries in particular that I look to a lot because of some personal connections. My husband works for a company that's based in Germany, and his office is in part in Switzerland. And so we are fortunate to spend some time there. But I look there and I look at how their rates are compared to ours. And, if we look, if you don't mind, if I just use Switzerland for an example.
Yeah.
So, Switzerland has a population of 8.6 million as a country, which is not far from our state. Our state's, a little more than 10 million, right? So in 2019, they had 193 fatalities. So, they're about the same size as us, and we had 1,700 and they had 193.
Yep.
And yet, their economy is growing, and, they have some of the same things that we have. They have, but when we look at that population difference, and that's what I'm really interested in, is when we look at fatalities per population, why are they doing so much better? And Germany's similar. Germany's population of about 82 million. And, if you consider, so the US is about 330 million, right? And so Germany had, just over 3,000 fatalities. So just their, that's an order of magnitude of 5 or 6 from the US. And so, what's the difference between them? And so, yeah, so those are some of the things that I look at, but it tells me, like, we are doing something wrong, and we need to do something better. So
yeah. And what's our pattern of injury and property damage crashes look like too? Is that also going up? Or is this a uniquely fatality problem in the US?
So they are going up, but the fatalities were going up sharper. At least, the first numbers say that the fatalities are going up sharper, which means, and if you think about the three, things we talked about: speeding, impaired driving, and seatbelt use, those are things that are much more likely to relate to a fatality.
Yep.
These are higher speed, unbelted. That's, if you're ejected from the vehicle, your chance of survival is so low. And then alcohol impairment, brings lots of problems, but they're not minor crashes. Alcohol impairment is running off the road and hitting a tree, and, or rolling over, other things that we know are more likely to cause fatalities. But injury crashes are definitely also up. So, and sometimes it's, I would say, like the grace of God, the difference between a fatality and an injury. A lot of times it has a lot to do with what kind of vehicle you drive, whether you're killed or injured.
Yep. Already a good question in the Q&A I see from Ruben. Thanks, Ruben. I love it when somebody asks a question. It was just next on my list too. Talk about a little bit what's happening in fatality per mile traveled, or Ruben says VMT, because 2020 COVID happens and VMT goes pretty far downward, and yet the fatalities shot upward. So our rate just looks horrible for at least for that year, right?
Yeah, I think our rate was somewhere around like 137 as a nation, or something around the really high, where it had been like 105, where there was lots of folks who wanted to get to 1. But so thank you, Ruben, for that question, because it gives me an opportunity to just introduce a concept. So I know that, that's how we talk about fatalities per VMT, and that's our accepted way. But I try not to talk about it that way. And I prefer methods that talk about it more related to an individual's risk, or people-centric. I like to talk about it per population because that's something we can all understand. I would love for us in the US to talk about it as like, what's the likelihood of someone dying in a crash in their lifespan, or other things that mean something to everyone. The VMT estimate is, unless you're a traffic engineer, that there's not really a metric for that, right? I mean, there's no real reference. And I think it does this really interesting thing where it kind of distances ourselves from the problem. That's fatalities per VMT. Well, what we should be saying is like, how many people died in our population, more of a person-based approach to how we talk about numbers. So I think for traffic engineers, I think VMT is an important metric. I don't think that, but I think when we're talking with others, we should be talking more about the individual, the person-based risk. So that's why I think about it in relation to population. I would love to get to the point where we did talk about it as, what someone's likelihood in their life to die in a crash. I'm
going to jump ahead a few questions on our list here. My understanding is that highway fatalities are mostly a young person's disease. That in the sense that they're more often the victims, and when a young 20-ish person dies on the highway, they should have lived another 60 or 65 years. So in terms of years of life lost, this problem really punches way above its weight.
Yep. I think I agree that I, at the start of our conversation, I used the term like that's how many people didn't make it to holiday dinner, because this visualization of holiday dinner is such a happy time, right? End of the year, get together with people, and just the visualization of that. And then when you think about young people, you can start to think about it like, how many didn't make it to high school graduation, or another milestone? There's lots of points in life, and if we talk about that, it kind of gives that frame of reference. But life expectancy loss could be another way to do that, and to really talk about the real impact, in the sense that it's a loss of life. So those two concepts are very much related to that kind of person-based risk.
Yeah, but my brother is a demographer. He reminds me all the time that through the last couple of years with COVID, but other causes too, that life expectancy is down in the US. We're suffering from all kinds of higher rates of drug overdoses, and cancer deaths are up, and all kinds of things. It's a grim time here. Are we in the highway safety business kind of getting lost in some of that too? Our rates are up, but so is everybody else. So, get in line kind of thing. You get a sense for that? Well,
so I think they're highly related, not cancer so much, but so there's this concept that I'm sure you've heard of deaths of despair. Right? Yeah. And usually when people are talking about deaths of despair, they're talking about overdoses, suicides, alcohol disease, but those same kind of maybe causes, those deaths of despair, relate to some of the deaths that we see on our roadways. The alcoholism, absolutely. But also, not wearing a seatbelt. I mean, a seatbelt is a measure that you take as an individual. It is an individual way to protect your health and safety. And so I think they're highly related. I think we should definitely be thinking about them as they're part of those deaths of despair. And there was this, I read about this French sociologist, maybe the late 1800s, where he coined something similar. He's saying they were like alienated deaths. And so I think over the last couple of years that, this idea of the alienated deaths, and he described it as they result from a breakdown in social equilibrium or social norms, or when an individual believes there's a lack of communal spirit or conclude the government is indifferent to their needs. And so if you think about how our country has been very polarized in the last couple of years about not just COVID and not just masks, but just so many things, I think that is causing more of these deaths of despair. I'm an extrovert. I love being around people. COVID was very hard for me, but I know lots of introverts it was very hard for as well. And because we do need one another, and being together reminds us of that spirit, that communal spirit. I think it also so that's about protecting maybe ourselves, but I think it also helps us to watch out for one another. One of my favorite safety programs or slogans is the Watch for Me NC program in North Carolina. And I love that concept of watch for me, watch for one another. So I think they are related. I think it's, I think your brother makes a good point, and it's difficult, but I think it's part of the same problem.
Okay, I'll tell him that. He'll enjoy hearing that from me. Got a couple other excellent questions in the Q&A. Thanks. Keep them coming. Anne asks about large vehicle crashes, SUVs, trucks, and is that part of the reason for the increase lately?
Well, as vehicles have gotten larger, they, the physics, force equals mass times acceleration.
Yep.
So as vehicles have gotten larger, yes, particularly like for our vulnerable users, there's, a larger vehicle presents even more of a hazard because there's more force, because there's more mass. So that's been a kind of an ongoing problem. I don't think that's necessarily shifted in the last 2 years. And we do see, where, there's been in the last 2 years, obviously there's been so many more delivery trucks on the roads. There's been a lot of not all of the packages that you get from Amazon get delivered by an Amazon driver, and a lot of times they're contractors. It's really unknown about what even what their safety protocols are. It's just contracted out. And so I don't think we're seeing that in the numbers yet, but I think it's there. Anne, I do think, having more delivery trucks in the vehicle mix in the neighborhoods on tight time frames, I think that will have an impact. But I can't point yet to that's in the data. But I like you, I am concerned about that. I am just in general concerned about the larger and larger vehicles and the more mass that they carry.
Sure. And then an anonymous attendee mentions distracted driving, which was not on your list, but maybe would be a strong number 4 there if you would expand the list.
Absolutely. And I think it's, we know it's underreported, right? Like, it's very rare that does anyone know, does the reporting officer know that someone was distracted, because, folks don't fess to it. But yeah, I think some of the problems that we're seeing are not just problems from COVID. I think there's actually lots of things that were brewing in the background, and these are definitely part of it. If talking to some police officers in some rural counties in North Carolina, I think just 3 years ago, they were concerned that they were seeing this trend of people watching TV while they were driving. And so, when the troopers see it first, before it's in the data. So if you kind of want to know what are we gonna hear about? You ask them what they're seeing, and that was what they were seeing. So yeah, distracted driving. And that can take a lot of forms, but I think probably one of the worst forms is in vehicle devices.
Speaking of troopers, let's follow the line of thought that says we've all seen the speeders ripping around the belt line, or 540 or 485, wherever they're going 110 miles an hour. I can't believe they're driving like that. And where is the highway patrol?
Mhm.
And why isn't the highway patrol getting those people off the street? So there's a sense out there that there was some decline in police presence that contributed to the speeding aspect here, maybe others too. Is that is that just perception, or is that grounded in some data that you know?
Well, I couldn't point to anything specifically, but my feeling on speed, and I think it's one of the most important aspects of highway safety. My feeling is that speed and willingness to speed has so much more to do with culture than it does with police presence. I think, police deterrence is one thing, but I think it's such a cultural issue, um, and just what we're willing, as a culture to look past. And so I think that's part of it, but that's only one aspect. It is culturally acceptable to speed. If put into Waze or any app where you're heading, their estimation includes that you speed. Um, we could all right now in the chat pod, right, put in what our calculation is for what speed we go on 40, right? Um, and I'm guessing some will say 7 over and some will say 11 over, but everyone's got it, right? So just the fact that we all make that calculation, means that as a culture we've kind of accepted it. And so I think that has a lot more than police presence. It could have some impact, um, but I think speed is so much more than that.
Yeah, yeah, good. Um, Another good question pops up along these lines. Newer vehicles integrate technology like lane departure and dynamic braking. Do you foresee any appetite for a car industry to introduce dynamic speed enforcement in the vehicle?
Mhm. Um, like a governor, essentially, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know that we have the appetite for that, but I'll tell you something related that actually does give me hope that we do have the appetite for. And that is some of the incentive programs from the insurance industry for drive
Mhm.
safe, and the ability to equip the car with different things that measure your driving, and they all do it a little differently. But and that started before they could even do that. There was the safe driver discount, right? If you didn't get in a crash, then and so I think that really holds a lot more potential. So for anyone who has young drivers, even college age drivers, you know do that for them. You love that person so much, right? So do that for them, like impose that on them because you love them. But having your vehicle able to govern, I don't know if there's appetite for that yet. My vehicle does tell me if I'm over the speed limit. It flashes, and that is such important feedback for me, because sometimes you do zone out a little bit. So when my vehicle chastises me, I feel it. So
When I take a trip, I usually check out a state car because I appreciate the fact that it beeps at me when I get 5 over the speed limit. Um, time to rein it in,
Yep.
Which my own car does not do that. So my theory during COVID anyway was that the risk takers were out on the road and the risk adverse people were home. My theory, anything to that?
I have some anecdotal evidence for that. So one of my best friends is an ER doctor, Wake Med. If you get stabbed, let's hope he's in the ER. He's pretty amazing. He's trauma 1. And so definitely during 2020, ER trips were way down, 30% or more. I mean, it depends on what month, but they were way down. And because people were being more careful because no one wanted to end up in the ER. So, it wasn't that people were taking care of the broken leg at home, but people were changing their behavior, maybe in part not to end up in the ER. So I think there is a lot to that. So, as you're pointing out, then there's a disparity, right? Then the risk takers are out there and the non-risk takers are home, right? And it kind of changes the overall dynamic.
It gives me some hope that with COVID receding, that maybe we return to whatever normal was, as you point out, maybe not 2011 level, but maybe at least 2019 level with,
Yeah. And so Dr. Harmer, you've known me for like 25 years. So I'm this super optimistic person. And I think some of the things, some of the deaths of despair and that, I don't know that it's going to go away, because we're taking less COVID provisions. I mean, I hope that it does. But I think we need that sense of connection with others to really return. And so let's hope that returns. Let's hope that there's less polarization. But I think that will, that will help. And I think there's some other effects. Do you mind if we shift the conversation to talk about marijuana?
Oh, please do. Yep.
Okay. So that's something that not related to COVID, right? But, if I'm looking at, I talked about, 2010, 2011 and where we were with fatality. So again, like take 10 years back from 2021 and kind of look at that 10-year point. In 2010, there weren't any states that had it legalized. And right now there are just 4 states left where it's fully illegal. So here in North Carolina, it's decriminalized, but it's, it's not considered, like there's only 4 states that's considered truly fully illegal. And so, as that was kind of happening, I don't think we were thinking enough about what that meant to highway safety. Because, an officer can pull someone over and test their alcohol sobriety and a breathalyzer. And there are some police officers who are trained to test for other substances, but it's much harder, much harder. And so, having that, an additional factor of, of inebriation, let's say, or impairment, I don't think that was fully, realized what that impact would be. And so I think some of what the losses we've had are from that. And, I don't know how much is being looked at with that. So.
I haven't read anything for sure. So maybe it's out there. Let's also turn the corner a little bit and start to talk about countermeasures. So,
Okay.
What can we do about this to get the number reversed a little bit? Do you have a favorite top of the line, the lowest hanging fruit there that, if we put you in charge tomorrow, you would start to put money in what?
Yeah. So my thoughts on countermeasures have changed over 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
So was very interested in traffic control devices and that potential kind of early on.
Yep.
And I've done a huge shift, and I'm very, very interested in design. And so if I ruled the world, or even just a small roadway, we would never build another cross section that wasn't a freeway that had more than 2 lanes in one direction.
Mm-hmm.
So I would take Six Forks Road here in Raleigh. And again, for those not in Raleigh, I'm sorry, just think about your major arterial that's cutting through neighborhoods, and there's pedestrians and everything that's 6 lanes wide. No, those would all be gone. There'd be a median in the center. There'd be at access points, right turn lanes, left turn lanes would open up. But that would be one of the major things I would do. I would start to really separate people. I know you've done a ton of work in separating movements at intersections. And so, yeah, I think all my energy would focus on physical separation. So in kind of this environment, this kind of urban and suburban environment, in a rural environment, I'm I am a huge fan of rumble strips. I think it's one of the only kind of silver bullets we've had over the last 20 years. So I'd be looking at shoulders, recovery area, rumble strips. I like safety edge, which is, putting an edge on the pavement so that if your vehicle leaves the lane, they can safely recover without overcorrecting. But yeah, I would be absolutely doing that. And then of course, the big thing, again, if I was in charge of even just a section of roadway, I would be thinking about speed and, how can we impact speed? So there are some things, out there that work, but I think, you know, I think those would be some of the things I would do. And there's other things. I don't want to say that traffic control devices don't work. There are some. I mean, one of my favorite traffic control devices is, an all red interval. So I think at intersections, just giving that 2 seconds, of all red, it just holds so much potential. Again, for those in Raleigh, the LPIs, I think that's such a great innovation. It's the leading pedestrian interval, so the pedestrian gets the walk signal just a couple seconds before, the parallel vehicles get the green. And so what does that do? Well, it kind of puts you out there invisible, and you can make that eye contact, so you're not leaving the curb at the same time that the vehicle is maybe taking their right turn or their left turn. So I think there are things out there, and I would do more of those, but I would be looking for major ways to reduce speed.
Yep.
So
Any good, really new countermeasures that you've heard recently that kind of jump off the page at you, that maybe the people listening haven't heard of yet, or we haven't tried yet in North Carolina?
so maybe just a little, not a lot though. And
Mhm.
it can reveal to the audience that, you let me know what you would be asking. And so, I did a little looking around to see maybe what I'd miss, because, when you ask that, there's not that much new out there. So so one of the things I did is I looked at, the pooled fund study website, which is where states come together and they propose an idea and try to get other states to put their money together because they're seeing something. Of the open solicitations, there's nothing that's new. Last week, some of my friends in Virginia reached out about gateway treatments, and that's something that I'm very interested in. So they're getting fairly interested in gateway treatments. So gateway treatments can take a lot of different forms. Um, I like the idea that if so you're in rural North Carolina, and you're on a fairly, high speed rural road, 55 miles per hour, let's say, but you come into a small town, and pick your small town, you come into a small town, and you need to bring your speed down in a major way, right? Um, and so a gateway treatment kind of helps you by telling you, and the gateway treatment could be a narrowing of the roadway. It could be maybe even a monument or something that
Mhm.
tells you you're entering.
Yep, yep.
Um,
Archway, yep.
yeah, something that says your roadway environment just changed, and and how you have to act and operate your vehicle in the interest of everyone is different. And so what the folks in Virginia were asking me about in particular were some of the pedestrian stand-ups, which is another form of gateway, in like in a CBD, where you have the pedestrian stand-up sign in the crosswalk that says you're entering an area that's has more pedestrian activity. And so a few years back, some folks in your home state of Michigan had tried that with some success. So I connected them on some of those ideas. But so that's one I see. I wish we could do more gateway treatments. We evaluated a couple, but not in any real sense, maybe like 10 years ago. But I'd like to see more of that. I think that really holds some potential. Start to acknowledge that you need to signal to the driver of the difference in environment. Um, I mentioned the leading pedestrian intervals. That's another one where there's been some innovation in some pedestrian treatments.
Yep.
The Federal Highway has a safe transportation for every pedestrian, their STEP program, and they kind of advance some pedestrian crossing concepts. So that's good, but there hasn't really been a lot. And I mean, one of the reasons is, we as an industry, we don't innovate very well, right? We don't have a lot of mechanisms set up to innovate. if you want to try something new, there is a process for traffic control devices through the MUTCD. You can do a request to experiment, but it definitely takes a while, and there's not a lot of incentive for us. I mean, it's almost like there's some idea that if you stay with the herd and what the herd is doing, that has some protection from litigation and other things, but which is good. But then consequently, what are our mechanisms to innovate? What are our mechanisms to try something different? And to kind of think differently. But
Yeah.
and there have been some, but as far as recent ones, I don't really know a lot that are recent. I'm want to see more agencies use ignition interlocks, and these are for people who have DWI convictions. Then they get to retain their license, but they have to blow into a device to make their ignition work. And there's some real potential there. So I think it was Ruben or Ann. No, Ann had asked about technology, and so I'd like to see some more technology working for us with things like that.
Right. Good. Yeah, we traveled to Ireland a few years ago. Entering every small town in Ireland, there's roundabout, there's an archway, there's a narrowing, there's something that really says here's town limits. Get yourself slowed down. It was really striking. We don't do that well here. Automated enforcement seems to be making a bit of a comeback after a really rough decade. What's your sense with that one?
Yeah, so similarly, before COVID started, I think I was at a Lifesavers conference, and I just felt like people were changing how they were talking about automated enforcement. I started to see it pop up more in strategic highway safety plans, which is a state level plan, and like Vision Zero plans, which is more of like a city level plan. I was seeing more discussion of it. But I would say I haven't seen the turn that I expected. So I thought we would see a quicker turn. If you and I had made a wager 3 years ago, I would have put more on it. Automated enforcement is an interesting one to me. I've done a lot of work in automated enforcement. And I stopped doing any work in automated enforcement maybe about 8 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And the reason was the conversation wasn't changing, and it had nothing really to do with the facts.
Yep.
And so I just kind of looked at like the 100 different things that I could be working on and putting my energy in, and I decided that one that wasn't informed by the facts was not one I wanted to be involved in. That being said, I think automated and speed enforcement holds so much potential. And I know this is a conversation with I don't know how many folks, but I'm actually a libertarian, and so I'm a libertarian who supports automated speed enforcement because I think it's the potential for a real impact on how many people are killed a year. I think it's worth the cost. So
but yeah, DC and Chicago just gave it such a bad name. California, I mean, the real sites out there that were just raising revenue that kind of tainted the whole pool there.
Yeah. And automated red light enforcement has some similar problems. There's been some agencies that have done it really well, and then some that haven't. Yeah. And I don't have as much interest in that because I think, a couple more seconds all red and just being willing to do that helps us in so many more ways. If you look at some of the data about like time into red violations, they're really at the start of the interval. So, but speed, I feel like has a good potential. And I mentioned Switzerland, and that's one I've been really studying Switzerland, and we travel there. We'll be again there in the month of June. And I mean, I feel like I spend most of my time working because I'm talking to people and observing, and they really effectively use automated speed enforcement. So
yeah. Right. I've been to China many times. They use automated speed enforcement there, but it's a joke because it's a fixed camera where everybody knows where the camera is. So they, speed as much as they want to until they get camera range, and crawl through that, and then they're off again. So it's got to be a well-designed program, well-designed technology, all of that. But yeah, still the potential is there. Okay.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned China. There was a paper at TRB, I guess maybe 3 years ago, that came through committee that I was the chair of at the time, about how there's actually within the taxi system in some of the cities that there's they automated speed enforcement within the taxi, but that the penalty was so low that it was better for the person to get basically a extra payment from the passenger, and they were willing to do it. So even there, the structure wasn't right. Like maybe the idea was good because your taxis, where they're at, but it just wasn't executed well. And then, like you said, it kind of undermines the whole idea.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Puts a bad name on the concept. Ruben points out that maybe the fixed camera could be the gateway treatment that we
there you go.
like so much.
Yeah, I love it, Ruben. You're putting two concepts together. It's perfect. That's what these conversations are great for.
Yeah. Is the golden era of safety research drawing to a close then? Not a lot of great new countermeasures. We've got a lot of the crash modification factors in hand for the ones that are out there. What's left to do research on?
Well, so your term there kind of makes me smile because I don't know if he coined it, but that's what Ray Kremis called it. And
Yeah,
he was is that where you got it from?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's great. That brings me a huge smile, because he was really committed to highway safety. He's no longer with us, but really, great commitment to highway safety. So I wouldn't say it's drawing to a close, but if we think about, like, I don't think we're going to SPF our way out of this. So safety performance function our way out of this. I think we've got some great information now, some great models, some great CMFs, but I'm actually less concerned if something is 10% effective versus 15% effective. So I'm concerned that the last few years, again, I mentioned TRB, but in my role in the Transportation Research Board for the last many years, I was receiving 250 papers through my committee at a time, and I wanted, for 99% of them, I wanted to say, so what? That we were making this little micro gains, and it would be that rare paper that would really make a leap. And so gets to the point where you can model and perfect your models and all, but really, to me, 10% versus 15%. Okay, we need to know that something's effective in a general order of magnitude. And then I don't want to disparage, the safety performance functions models. They definitely help us with the concept of what should be expected for a roadway. But yeah, I think some of the things that agencies are dealing with now is, so that information is good, but we do a lot of work in Massachusetts. You mentioned we're based there. There's a great state safety engineer there. You may know her, Bonnie Poland. And as Bonnie puts it, like, okay, those are great. Highway safety manual is great, but I get to my intersections in Massachusetts and they don't look anything like that. And every one of them is unique. And so, so she needs the ability to, to analyze an intersection when it doesn't fit all the requirements of of what's in the highway safety manual. So and of course in Massachusetts, where that a lot of the intersections have been there for 300 years, and so they don't fit the I don't think she has a perfect 90-degree intersection anywhere in her whole state. So
they've all got 6 legs.
Yeah.
We got some good questions in the Q&A. Appreciate that. I'm going to go back to those now.
Okay.
And we've got a few minutes. If you've got another question to type in, please do. And ask another good question here. The hypothesis that reduced congestion in 2020 particularly led to more speeding, which in turn led to more crashes. So is that true? And if so, do we root for more congestion then?
I mean, on some roadways, that's the case, but in our rural roadways, it's not. So where a lot of the speeding fatalities are happening are on those rural 2-lane. So on some facilities, yeah, I mean, I think, I'm not a fan of Capitol Boulevard, but I'll take Capitol Boulevard when it's gridlocked. So if I can crawl along that road, much prefer that to 55 miles per hour. So I think in some functional classes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Mike asks about changing the culture with not wearing seatbelts, and this is one. This continues to blow my mind. It's been we've known this for 70 years, and the education has been out there for 50 years, and so wow, how do you change that culture and get to that seemingly growing part of the population that refuse to wear seatbelts even.
Yeah, it's motorcycle helmets are the same.
Yeah.
So there's states that have repealed their motorcycle helmet laws, and it's kind of shocking if you forget that they don't have a motorcycle law, and then you're in the state and someone passes you on a motorcycle without a helmet, and it takes a second to realize, wait, that's not the law here. So I don't. I'm very concerned about that, about the shift in those ideas, and there are people who want to repeal some of the seatbelt laws, even here in North Carolina. And so I think we really have to fight against that. We can't lose ground there. But the motorcycle helmets and seatbelts, I mean, they've been so effective. That's an area where we've actually made huge gains. That's my example of that you can change culture, and then to be losing ground is really sad.
Yeah. Got the number that I remember is up to about 90% in North Carolina as far as seatbelt usage, and then slipping from there. It blows my mind. Ruben asks any different effectiveness between the bicycle-friendly rumble strips versus the standard rumble strip?
I think they have about the same effectiveness. So bicycle-friendly rumble strip has some gaps, but I think my big thing, if we can design, if we can allow bicycle-friendly rumble strips, it helps us to get rumble strips in. Great, I'll take a bicycle-friendly rumble strip over no rumble strip any day.
Yeah. Good. An anonymous attendee comes up with a good question that pedestrian fatalities are in the news anyway. Are they also trending upward?
Actually, I think we had some improvement in that nationally, but if we did, it was just slight. I think maybe a really good thing about COVID is the amount of people who walked and biked, and like you couldn't buy a bike in the first 6 months of 2020. And so Dan Burden from Walkable Communities, I think the first time I heard him speak was in the mid 90s, and he talked about if we all biked and walked more, that we would drive like pedestrians and bicyclists. We would be watching out if we had more of those experiences. So I think that will be a positive, having 2 years of everyone walking and bicycling more. I think that will eventually culturally have a positive impact. There might be a gleaming positive impact of 2 years of COVID.
In the sense that the drivers are now looking for beds and bikes.
Yeah, some firsthand experience of what it's like to try to ride on the roadway. Yeah,
true too. Yep, good. Our friend Daniel Carter asks about the role of data in improving traffic safety. Is it important just to improve the data collection and handling capabilities?
Well, so happy to have Daniel on the phone. Of course, he asks a hard question, but I think it's very important. So one of the even the difficulties of preparing for this conversation is there's so much out there that's a lag. And, we should know everything we possibly can about 2021 already. I mean, what month is this? I mean, we're all a week more and we'll be in the month of May. North Carolina, thankfully, great data systems, but like nationally, so we're going to be talking about things in the rearview mirror because we don't know enough about them, because it takes so long to get the data, and it doesn't need to be that way. It must be much quicker. So
yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I agree. From what I know, North Carolina is really at the forefront of that. It's certainly not perfect, but most other states really lag literally behind. Let's see. Tad in my unit asked a good question about brighter headlights, and that we seem to be putting vehicles out there with brighter headlights. is that good, or does that mean more headlight glare?
Mhm.
You know, comes back to hurt us.
Yeah.
Any thought on that?
So I think, Kat, it's a good question, and I don't know any studies that specifically relate to that. I think anecdotally, there's a lot of I don't know the formal name, but adaptive headlights that know if you're taking a right turn that they illuminate to the right. So I do think there are some. I think those have huge advances. To have that headlight give you your cone of vision that you're turning into instead of the one you're looking at is huge. But I'm not sure about the brighter and what that impact would be. I mean, so you make a good point about glare for other drivers. I think also, we see this with some of our raised pavement markers, that sometimes it might even induce people to drive a little faster. But that would be a good one to kind of explore.
Yeah. And finally, in the Q&A, our friend Ed Johnson asks, or really makes a comment here, I think agreeing with you that we really need more granular data was his phrase here. I agree with that. That's a good phrase about exactly what types of crashes are out there resulting in the deaths and serious injuries. It's a shame that we don't have that quicker and with more detail.
Yeah, because it's highway safety is such a complex puzzle, and I know we're running short on time, but just as one example, some states have started to develop health indices that relate to like people's access to healthcare and all different things. And when in Virginia, we overlaid it with crashes and found they were very correlated. And so what that tells me is there's so many parts of the puzzle that we're missing.
Yeah. With our few minutes left here, maybe close with this, or let's see how our time goes. But give me the optimistic side of this, that in a few years the U.S. is going to turn into Switzerland or Ireland or Sweden, or I think those are the places we mentioned here. And what does that look like? Can we get to that level without changing our lifestyle?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yes. Why can't we, right? But I think we have to change our expectation. We've decided that this is acceptable, right? And so we need to change our expectation about what's acceptable. Why are 42,000 people dying? Why is that acceptable? And so I think we have to change our expectation there. I think we have to change our expectation on speed. I think those are the things that we really need to do, to make a difference. We have to expect different. And I do think we are complacent. I think, if I talked about if I owned a section of road, if I owned a city and I wanted to make a real difference, I would say as a city, we've decided it's not acceptable to speed. And outside of our gateway treatment, there's going to be a sign: when you enter a town, speeding is not acceptable. So Daniel Carter taught me about like the broken window concept years ago. And if I think about like the DC metro system, there's no graffiti there, right? Because they've accepted that there's no graffiti is acceptable. So can we carry that idea forward to a city?
Yeah, and right, set the regulations, the laws, post the signs, and then enforce the heck out of them at that level. But changing the culture too. I mean, that's sort of implied with your answer too, is somehow getting that idea out to 330 million Americans, that it's not okay to keep doing what we're doing.
But maybe we start with one city, right?
That'd be awesome. Pick one. Let's go.
Raleigh.
Kim, thanks so much. That was great. I wish we had a couple more hours. As you know, I sent you a list of questions. I think we got through about a third of them, and there's lots more out there. And the participants brought in some really good ones too, and I got the feeling there's a lot more there too. So
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for asking me, and thank you to Ruben and Ann and Daniel and Ed and Tad and Anonymous for all the questions. So
Yeah, it was good stuff. Gonna say thanks to everybody. Thanks to Andy. Thanks to our sponsors. And turn it back to Andy for a few parting words and a reminder of how to get our certificate. So very good.
All righty. There we go. All right. Again, thanks for everybody for attending. We hope you enjoyed. Again, we had a decent number of you who emailed me for the link to join. I will try my best to add all of you to the list, the email list to receive your PDH and evaluation forms. Again, everybody should receive those this afternoon sometime. I'm not sure exactly when, but it should be before the end of the day today. If you don't receive them, please get in touch with me tomorrow, and I will send them to you then. Again, Dr. Hummer and I will try and schedule another one of these for June. Is that what we're aiming for? Yep, I'm getting a nod for June. Yep. Well, and we will advertise those through the Nixi Weekly and on the website and through the usual channels. Feel free to invite friends and colleagues throughout the industry. We're always looking to get new voices, new perspectives, new questions when we do these sessions. But again, thank you very much. You'll get your email this afternoon with your PDH forms. And until next time, thanks for attending.